Well, thank you for your welcome. It's certainly good to be back. We've been gone for the last 4 Sundays on some vacation with Nicole and I, and we've certainly enjoyed our time away, but we are back and we are ready to look forward not only into this latter part of the summer, but also into the fall and the, end of the year. What? You know? What? August is going to be here next week. It's crazy. Our readings this morning that we have, in many ways, parallel each other. Specifically, the Old Testament lesson and the gospel that we just heard. You've probably recognized this. You know, what Missy read, was a story of Elisha who fed a lot of people with some bread, right? And then, of course, we have the famous story of Jesus, who takes the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and also feeds a multitude of people. In both of these stories, we have some very real parallels, some very real similarities. For example, an anonymous donor in both of them gives a small amount of food that is blessed to feed miraculously many more people than expected. Both miracles end up authenticating, there we go, that's the verb I'm looking for, authenticating the prophet's ministry. Elisha has just taken over for Elijah, and they're kind of like, well, are you really going to be the same man of God that Elijah was? And so, boom, there you go. What do you think now? All right, I got the Lord's anointing? Yeah, I do. Okay. And then Jesus, of course, also wants to show himself as being one approved by God, as being one who is indeed from the Father. So he does these signs, these miracles, to show that indeed what he says is true. Better listen up. Make sense? Okay? But even though these 2 miraculous provisions actually occur about 800 years apart from each other, okay? Elisha's miracle of the food with the bread, okay, and Jesus' miracle with the 5 loaves and 2 fish take part about 800 years apart. But there's very real similarities that we want to kind of hone in on here, okay? So, we're going to look at these 2 stories from 2 Kings and from John chapter 6. We're going to hone in on these 2 stories, and we're going to see in what ways these stories actually not only parallel, but how they actually intersect and affect our lives today, what we can learn from them. All right? So, let us begin. First off, in both situations, we have people who are hungry. And that's like a no-brainer, like, well, of course, okay, people are hungry. But in the Old Testament reading, there's actually a famine in the land. Okay, we're not just talking about people having grumbling stomachs like, oh gosh, breakfast was so long ago. We're talking about there is actually a famine in the land. A famine in the sense that food is scarce. Food at this point in time, when Elisha is going to perform this miracle, is not a luxury. It's not like, well, gee, do you want Italian or Chinese tonight? Okay, food is not a luxury, it's a necessity here. Because if you don't eat, you die. Okay, so there is a famine in the land. And likewise, in Jesus' time, there is also a famine. Not necessarily in the physical sense, but people are spiritually hungry. They are suffering under a physical oppression. Rome is in control. Rome has all the cards. And the people are suffering underneath it. And so to seek a physical, or to seek for this physical problem, they're seeking a spiritual cure. They're thinking there is a Messiah, there is a spiritual man who is supposed to come one day who will actually save us. They're thinking Jesus is the one. So many times our physical realities have a spiritual root. Many times our physical hardship needs a spiritual solution. I don't know if you've found this to be true in your life, but oftentimes there are things that do occur in our lives that are not the result of just simply, oh wow, gosh, isn't the world a hard place? Sometimes it's simply because there is some sort of sin, there is some sort of oppressiveness that has come upon you, maybe even from the enemy, demonically attacking you. We need to seek spiritual solutions for our physical answers, or for our physical problems. Today in our land, there is certainly a famine. Many of us probably do not know what it means to eat or die, but there are people who certainly do struggle with hunger in our country. 1 in 6 Americans actually face hunger. But beyond just that, there is definitely a spiritual hunger. Would you agree?
Amen.
There's a big spiritual famine in our land. People are desperate to find something somewhere that will seek and give them the affection they want, the meaning they want, the purpose they want, some sense of control that they want. You were made to worship. And if you're not going to worship Jesus, you will find worship in something or somebody else. You may not call it worship, but where do you spend most of your time, or where do you spend most of your resources? If you make an honest inventory of that, you will discover what you're truly worshiping. Even if you say, oh, yeah, I'm a Christian, I worship God. Yeah? What does your time and resources say? God or something else? We are bombarded with images of how we are simply not enough. But the latest iPhone is all you need. Oh no, the newest sparkling mineral water is what you need. Oh no, this investment firm will make your future secure. Oh no, the only way that you're going to have meaning in your life is to have this kind of fun. But they never really do satisfy, do they? There's always a next best thing. Whatever stresses us, whatever steals our peace, whatever makes us feel so discontent, we have a famine. We are hungry, and we need to make a choice as to what's going to feed us in that time. Will we look to the Lord, or will we look elsewhere, or to another piece of news, or another person, or another object to satiate our stress? In the Old Testament reading, the man who brings his offering, the man who brings those loaves, okay? He is bringing them to the prophet of God. He's not bringing them to another God. He's not bringing them to another altar. He's bringing them to the Lord. Likewise, in John chapter 6, Jesus asks Philip kind of a question. How are we going to feed them? He asks him that to test him. Are you going to trust me in performing this, or are you going to look elsewhere? Poor Philip. He got a pop quiz. I hate pop quizzes. Okay? Yeah. He failed the pop quiz. 6 months' wages wouldn't buy enough. We're not looking to money here. We're looking to Jesus. Famine is an opportunity for faith. Whatever lack you are facing in your life, you too have a choice. Will you trust the Lord, or will you try to figure it out yourself or through other means? The miracles done by Elisha and Jesus were not so much about the people being given what they needed, as it was about showing who the Lord was. He is trustworthy, he is faithful, and indeed, Jesus is Lord. Make sense? There is a famine in the land in both stories. People are hungry. If not physically, they're certainly starving spiritually. And in both cases, the people are given a choice. Will you exercise your faith to the Lord, or will you exercise your faith towards something or someone else? Same thing is true for us today. We are starving. Who do you look to? Jesus said, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. Your ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness, yet they died. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever, and the bread that I offer is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. That's the whole point. Look, we can feed you. Yeah, we can certainly give you the things that you need to satisfy that grumbling tummy. But ultimately, you're still going to die. You don't just need bread. You need the bread of life. Whatever our famine, whether we are starving for attention, starving for affection, starving for self-worth, starving for forgiveness, starving for justice, starving for a new start, starving for a purpose, starving for joy, starving for peace, starving for hope, starving for real love, whatever you are starving for, you need to turn to Jesus. He and only He is the bread of life. Will you choose Him in faith, or will you seek other bread and be hungry again? You see those commercials about Snickers? Okay. Snickers is the one that satisfies, right? And now they've got all these other new labels, not just Snickers, indifferent, indecisive, angry, all these kinds of things, eat a Snickers, and you will be satisfied. I want to get a Snickers bar and just put Jesus on it, okay? You hungry? Here you go. This is what you need. You need the bread of life. He satisfies. Don't get me wrong, I like Snickers, but I will get hungry again. Famine, faith. Both we see in the stories of Elisha in 2 Kings and with Jesus in John chapter 6. Let's move on. Famine, faith. Thirdly, offering freely. In both cases, both with Elisha and with Jesus, both miraculous provisions only occur because an unknown person offers freely their own food. In Elisha's case, a man, we don't know who, comes with loaves of bread and some fresh picked corn, straight from the harvest. It was custom to give the first fruits, the first harvest, to God, which is why even today as Christians, you will always be challenged to give to God your best financial gift, not whatever is left over or whatever you can spare. In Jesus' case, it is a boy. We don't know who, just a boy who is in the crowd who has 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Crackers and sardines, basically. It was probably his ration. Meager, yet it was offered freely to Jesus for his use. In none of these cases, with the man or with the boy, is what they offer, is it enough? Okay? We got over 5,000 people here, God. 5 loaves and 2 fish just ain't going to cut it. We got over 100 people here, God. These loaves here, this corn, ain't going to cut it. It's like trying to spit at a fire to put it out. It's just, what good is this, However, whether it's the barley loaves and corn or whether it's the cakes of bread and fish, the amount offered is not what's important. It's not about how much you are giving. What is important is that both of these were sacrifices. They were costly. In the case with the man, it was the fruits of the harvest. It was the first fruits. It was the very best. It was right from the stalk, right from the harvest, right out of the oven. It was the best. It was a sacrifice. There was a famine going on. You better believe he could have been like, I got to eat all this. And once he gets his fill, then he's going to, give the rest over to the priests, to the prophets. And in the case with the boy, 5 loaves and 2 fish, it was his ration, not much, but it was all he had, and he gave it. See, it's not about the amount, but is what you give, is it your best, or is it the leftovers? Your free giving to the Lord is not about what you have in your checkbook at the time. Or is it just about because, a 20 is good enough? Your free giving to the Lord is an expression of worship. And it, too, is a physical representation of the spiritual condition of your heart. Do you give freely, or do you give begrudgingly and sparingly? 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 6 and 7 says, "Whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. And whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully." Each person must give as they have decided in their heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion. for God loves a cheerful giver. I do not think it's a stretch to say that both the man and the boy freely or cheerfully gave, not because they were compelled, but truly only out of a free offered sacrifice to the Lord. Do you in God trust, or do you in your purse trust? When we offer to God our best, he does amazing things with it. Because there's this false dichotomy, and I hear this a lot. There's a false dichotomy that is often set up. Well, if you trust God, then why are you asking people to give? No. Because we trust God, we know he will use people to give. From the very beginning in Genesis, God's plan was always to use people to work with him in his plan of care. He invited Adam and Eve to steward with him in creation, right? Work with me in taking care of this land, of the planet. And even after they rebelled, what did God do? He invited Abraham. Work with me to be a blessing to the nations, right? I will bless you so that you will be a blessing to the nations. He invites Moses. Hey, Moses, I got to free the Israelites out of Egypt. Will you come and partner with me to do that? Oh, I can't speak, Lord. Come on, and you can do it. Oh, okay. You know the story. He invites the prophets, like Elisha, to speak for him to his people. And Jesus invites the boy. Jesus invites the disciples to join him in feeding the crowd. He has them sit down, but then he allows the people, the disciples, to be the ones to actually give it out, right? So he's always inviting us to partner with him in his work. To say, well, it's either God's going to give or man's going to give is a false dichotomy. God gives through his people, if his people are willing. But will they will abundantly, or will they will sparingly? Our giving is not about getting money. It's about giving you the chance to join with God in his work through his people, the church. It's about helping you to exercise faith to let go of what the world says you need and allowing you to put your faith in action by trusting God to bless your offering. Did you know that your giving is a spiritual act of worship? So how do you worship? Oh, I love you extravagantly, God. Oh, I just love you with all my heart. Here's a 5. Freely, freely you have received, freely, freely give. Go in my name, and because you believe, others will know that I live. What are you freely offering to the Lord, that he might multiply to bless others? Famine, faith, offering freely, and the last point, fullness. Both with Elisha and with Jesus, the people have their fill. And there's leftovers. They get to have doggy bags. Right? 12 baskets left over. Now these 12 baskets aren't like, big wicker baskets. These baskets are actually more like kind of like satchels. Okay, like little purses. God's goodness is not just so that you'll have enough for today. You'll have what you need every day. His mercies are new, how often? Every day. Every morning. Our reading from Ephesians says God is able to do far more abundantly than all that we ask or imagine. And earlier in Ephesians 3, as we heard, it is out of his glorious riches that we are strengthened, rooted and established in love, and filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. God gives fully. When we exercise our faith, especially in a famine, and when we do it freely. will bless to give to you fully. The purpose is for your continued worship. It's for you to continue to give him praise, and it's for you to declare that goodness to others so that they too will do the same. I have a problem with those who just come to be filled, but do not let the fullness they receive translate it into helping to fill others.
Amen.
If you're just coming to be spiritually filled, but don't have any sort of outflow back in your life, we have a problem. Why did God bless Abraham? To be a blessing to the nations. Why did God free the Israelites from Egypt? To be a light unto him so that other nations would stream to the Lord. Why did God let the Israelites go into captivity? Because they forgot about that and started cheating others and not taking care of other people. And why did Jesus save us? So that we would be able to tell others about the same salvation and love in him. Yes, God will fill your cup to overflowing, and you will have leftovers in your basket. But your fullness must not be an incentive for just your own worship. It should be an incentive to help others worship God too. Famine, faith, freely offering, and fullness. The four parallels that we see in our stories from 2 Kings chapter 4 and from John chapter 6. Will you exercise them in your land, or will you continue to starve?